Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Securing SAP Systems from a Credit Card Breach with Delego's PCI-Validated Point-to-Point Encryption solution. I'm Christine Murray, Marketing Manager at Delego, and will be one of your moderators for today's session. I'm joined by co-moderator Danielle Klukos, Vice President of Marketing at Bluefin Payment Systems, who is hosting this webinar with us. Good morning, Danielle.
Good morning. Thank you, Christine. Great to have everyone here. Thank you for joining us.
Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. This session is recorded and our audience has been muted to avoid any background noise. At any time during this session, you can send us your questions or comments using the chat window of the GoToWebinar control panel located on the right side of your screen. We will monitor and collect your questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. We hope that you will take away some valuable insights today as we discuss PCI-Validated Point-to-Point Encryption and its role in devaluing card data, securing your SAP system, and reducing PCI compliance scope. So briefly, let's go over today's agenda. We will be presenting the current state of payment security, how malware operates to steal card data, the role of EMV tokenization and P2PE, the differences between PCI-validated and non-validated solutions, PCI-validated P2PE and its role in devaluing card data, and the Delego Bluefin PCI P2PE solution for SAP. Finally, we will end our session with a Q&A to answer any questions you submit in the chat window. Next, I would like to introduce our speakers today. Mike Verwolf is Senior Technical Account Executive here at Delego and is responsible for new business acquisition. Mike has over 30 years of IT experience and joined Delego just 4 years ago, managing many of our large global clients requiring a high level of technical engagement. Mike helped bring the Delego Bluefin solution to market and collaborates with Bluefin on specific customer requirements. Also joining us today, Rustin Miles. Rustin brings 20 years of payment security experience to his role of Chief Innovation Officer, where he serves as Bluefin Payment Systems security thought leader and technology evangelist. Rustin founded Bluefin in 2002 and speaks at many conferences and industry events on payment security throughout the year. Rustin is a PCI professional, certified payments professional, certified internet business strategist, and an active participant with the PCI Security Standards Council. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike to introduce you to Delego and our partnership with Bluefin.
Thank you, Christine. So before we get into the topic of the webinar, I just want to briefly introduce you to Delego. So with over 20 years of SAP experience, Delego is one of the largest providers of secure and integrated payment solutions for merchants running SAP. We provide secure e-payment solutions for e-commerce, call centers, and accounts receivable. Our proprietary tokenization and security solutions are mature and used by some of the largest corporations in the world, including SAP. The Delego team of SAP experts has a detailed understanding of SAP best practices and integration requirements. The Delego middleware suite offers streamlined order-to-cash payments management, facilitating authorization, settlement, and reconciliation functions in SAP. We help minimize your PCI scope and meet PCI compliance. All credit card data is maintained external to your SAP systems. Only a token is returned to SAP for processing. The Delego cloud-based service is PCI DSS Level 1 certified, and as a result, with our PCI letter of attestation, our clients' audit requirements are reduced significantly from over 300 questions on an SAQ-D to less than 30 on an SAQ-A. Delego has developed integrations with over 50 different payment processors around the globe. We are processor neutral. The flexibility to work with many processor partners provides our global customers with options to ensure funds are settled locally and exchange costs are minimized or eliminated. We assist with credit card and debit card acceptance, e-check and ACH, as well as alternative payments like PayPal and Amazon payments. Now, regarding our partnership with Bluefin, Delego established a strategic partnership with Bluefin Payment Systems to offer PCI-Validated Point-to-Point Encryption, or P2PE, to our clients. The Delego Bluefin P2PE solution is tightly integrated into the Delego suite of products to help protect our clients' payment data and further minimize the risks and costs and the scope of PCI compliance. Technologies such as Bluefin's PCI-Validated P2PE are a key component of a holistic payment strategy that ensures payment data is PCI devalued as it traverses the merchant's workstations and network. And we're excited to provide this level of card security to our clients. So with this background in mind, I'd like to hand it over to Rustin to provide further background on his company, Bluefin, and get started with today's agenda. Rustin?
Thanks so much, Mike. As we said, our payments practice was founded in 2007, and our security practice really in 2002, and our security practice in 2007. It was mentioned that we do actively participate with the PCI Security Standards Council and have been a very large proponent in the creation of this P2PE program, and also the changes involved in version 2 of this program. Bluefin was the very first provider in North America to be validated by PCI for this, and that was back in March of 2014. We have 4 issued patents on some of the technologies that I'm talking about today. We have 3 more pending. I think 2 of them should be coming up next month, finally, after they've been in for about a year and a half now. We have offices all over the world, 4 domestically, and then also for the last 2 years, we've had our network operating center and a development center with our employees in Waterford, Ireland. So that's always a fun one to travel to. But I'll move on here. Mike gave a great overview of what P2PE is, and I think I'll dive into some of the details here. But let me set the stage. So first of all, as you all know, we hear a lot about the Target breach, and back in 2013 that sort of started this litany of breaches. But how many have happened, and what is the impact? Well, as a matter of fact, last year, 1,100 reported breaches. Now, we don't know how many breaches go unreported, right? The bad guys don't want these to get reported. They kind of want to silently sit there and get credit cards from your systems. So the problem's even much worse than this. Going back, it was about 800 and 600 the year before, and I think 500 the year before that. So as you can see, the breaches are increasing in scope and impact here. Millions of records being compromised. These are, according to the ITRC, the Identity Theft Resource Center, are the facts of where we're getting these reported point-of-sale breaches. So what is the culprit? According to the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, which is the VDBIR, if you follow the risk industry like I do, that comes out every year. And what I love about this report is that it analyzes just how these hackers are doing it. It's nice to know that there was a breach at a particular vendor, but wouldn't it be nice to know exactly how that breach happened at that merchant or at that retailer or wherever it was? And these details are, of course, scrubbed, so you don't get to know exactly who, but that information is gleaned across all these thousands of breaches, and then they can come up with analysis saying, here are the attack vectors that the bad guys are using. Here's the kinds of software that they're attacking. Here are the ways they're attacking it, and a lot of information comes out of that. But of course, the biggest one is that over 95%, so let's just say all of it, is due to malware when it comes to point-of-sale intrusions. Literally 5 attacks every second, 170 million a year. So these breaches are all happening from malware. And this is different, because when you look back to DSW or TJ Maxx, the breaches of yesteryear, those breaches were happening where the bad guys were penetrating the defenses of some giant corporate back office and getting a big giant database of credit cards or getting them out of error logs or some sort of massive move of data. But with the advent of the PCI security standards, the DSS, as we all know, a lot of these merchants have been protecting out and putting their high walls around their systems, hard for the hackers to get in. So the hackers have pivoted and innovated malware. And so all they do there is they go out to the edge and they put this bad software on point-of-sale systems and applications, workstations, and networks, and it silently listens to the data as it comes across. So malware is the largest threat. That cost, according to the Ponemon Institute, each year they come out with a report saying, here's about what it would cost you per stolen record in terms of credit monitoring, in terms of reissuing. You got to pay for the reissuance of all the cards, legal fees, all these different PR, etc. It's about $165, and at last count, Target Breach was over $300 million with their most recent suit. They had to pay more a couple months ago. So the solution, according to all of this, for the PCI Security Standards Council, is point-to-point encryption, or P2PE, and that's PCI-Validated Point-to-Point Encryption, a very important distinction, which we'll get through today. Next slide, please. Malware, I gave you a little bit of an overview of it, but mal meaning bad, or mal if you want to say it, malware. And this is software, some sort of a virus, etc., that usually gets into these systems, and the hackers have these, the attacks are automated, and then it'll find a hole, it will inject the software in there, and then silently listen to the credit card data as it comes across. So the way to fix that, of course, is to encrypt that data or devalue that data before it gets there. And this is really not anything new. Any of us, if we went to a web browser and we went to an Amazon or an eBay or to some other retailer, especially if it was an online retailer we didn't know or normally do business with, we've known probably for the last 2 decades, all of us on this call, to go look at the browser, bottom right or wherever it's at, to see if there's a lock, or to look up for the HTTPS, knowing that that means secure, just to see that this is encrypted. So your credit card information is not being sent to an unsecure page. That's common knowledge. Everybody knows that. But everybody on this call today will probably walk out and use their credit or debit card at merchants and retailers all over this country, or call in to call centers and give that credit card number over a phone or to a back office, to that contact center. And in those cases, all of that credit card data, even in retail and in the card not present environments, is going in unencrypted, and meaning that any viruses or malware on the workstations, PCs, laptops, networks, back office servers, applications, anything, any one of those places, a malware can get in there and listen to that data, send it off to Russia to be sold on the black market, and you have a breach. So that is what we're talking about. Nothing really all that new. It's implementing technology that has existed in an area that it just makes sense to put it in, right? Next slide, please. Wait, why doesn't EMV fix this? The EMV is the chip card. I know all of us are probably sitting on a wallet or in our purse of credit cards and debit cards that have a chip in them. That technology has been completely misperceived by, or misunderstood by virtually everybody in the industry, or especially outside of the industry. Everyone sees that and says, oh, this must be a secure credit card, and this whole new process is safe. I can use my card again. That technology was never developed to solve a breach or to protect against malware, and it doesn't do that. That's not its purpose in life. That technology is there to make sure that the plastic card itself, when used in a face-to-face card present transaction only, so it doesn't work for card not present, call center, back office, anything else, mail order, none of it, but if you are in a situation where you can dip the card into the reader, that reader can determine from that chip whether or not that card is counterfeit or fake plastic. So that is all it does. So great, look over, your books for the last year and find out how many counterfeit cards you've had that resulted in a chargeback, and you can look at just about how much EMV would have helped you in that face-to-face space only. For many of the merchants we've worked with that process perhaps billions of dollars, they might see $50,000, $100,000 a year in chargebacks spread over billions of dollars in processing. This is a blip, and in no way do they want to implement a process that takes 10 to 15 seconds for every transaction, is more complicated, is slower, and all of that with EMV. So it works for some merchants. If you're selling Rolexes in a pawn shop, well, you don't want to get a fake card, okay? Understood. But if you're selling other things, or if you have information to secure, you have an ongoing relationship, maybe EMV is not something you need at this time. Maybe it is. So I leave that up for your own decision and your own situation. It's a great technology. but it is not here to stop breaches. It is here to stop counterfeit cards. And if you want to think philosophically, the counterfeit cards really are a result of what? The breaches. So don't take my word for it. Look across the pond. The UK, they implemented EMV. It was not a liability shift over there. It was a mandate. In other words, everybody had to accept chip cards, and this was in the 2008 timeframe. So they had pretty good penetration of everyone doing it. So these numbers are really helpful to know that it wasn't like here in the States where it was optional. And right after doing that, their card not present fraud spiked by 80% and is holding. And that's card not present fraud with 16-digit credit card numbers. So what that means is all of these breaches are still happening over there because malware was never addressed, and the bad guys are getting the credit card numbers. Well, they can't go create a chip, but what can they do? They can go online or over the phone or come in with a fake card that's broken and then have the clerk key in the card number. So these numbers are still being stolen because of the malware, and then they're being used for all these other fraudulent attacks. For that reason, I told you that Bluefin was the very first in North America to be validated by PCI. There were 6 other prior to us in the UK, and that's because they know over there exactly what EMV does and doesn't do. Now that we've gone through our shift, we're seeing a major demand, an uplift in demand for this PCI-validated P2PE. Next slide, please. Point-to-point encryption fights malware. This is what we talked about just here before. We encrypt the data. I will point out that we inject millions of keys into each of these devices. So you get this keypad, right? You're keying the credit card number in there. A unique one-time use key encrypts that particular transaction through the system. So that means every time you key a credit card number, it is using a one-time use, unique, strong cryptography, NSA strength called triple DES, and that's 3 times the data encryption security standard. So triple that, and then a unique key for each transaction. And that's one of the reasons why PCI has considered this technology so powerful and doing so much to provide such a benefit for you all. Next, please. Before we get into some of the details, we'll just set out the 3 major benefits. Obviously, we've talked about securing the cardholder data, but reducing PCI scope is a big one. We want to secure that data so you never have a breach, but boy, wouldn't it be nice if there were other benefits, and there really are. We'll get to that in the next slide. Protecting your brand. Yes, it's important to connect the consumers, to protect the consumers, their cardholder data, but also just think of the impacts of a breach to your brand. So this is also protecting your business continuance as well. Next slide, please. Before we talk about some of the PCI scope differences, let's talk about the differences between this PCI program called P2PE and what you probably have heard about, which has existed for quite some time, and that might be called end-to-end encryption or non-validated encryption, non-listed encryption. Those systems do exist, and I can say that Bluefin had a non-listed solution because PCI didn't come out with the standard until 2011. And as I told you, we've been doing this for many years before that. So major differences if you're looking or considering any other product that's not on PCI's website. And I urge you, if you are, please go to PCI's website, look up the P2PE solutions, and see if it is listed on that site. If it's not, and you're doing it, then you're not going to get the benefits that we're talking about. Some might say, oh, so it's just an audit thing, what's the big deal? I can tell you there's a huge difference, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. The first one is PCI scope reduction. With this technology, if you use PCI's products that are validated by them, you can get up to 90% scope reduction. That means that a lot of the requirements that you're having to do go away. You don't necessarily get that with non-listed solutions. Certified injection facilities. This means that you can, any of the parties that are part of this process, so Bluefin or the distributors and the manufacturers of all these devices have all been brought in and audited independently and separately and together as a solution by PCI to deliver this product to you in a secure fashion. The chain of custody. If you look at other devices out there that come from other products, just other non-listed solutions, you'll notice that you can buy the device from eBay, and who knows how it got to you, and who knows where it goes, and who knows what may have got into that device on its way. With PCI, they demand maintaining a chain of custody through the entire life cycle of that device, and Bluefin manages that with our P2PE manager for you. This next one is my favorite, tamper-proof terminals, or as I might say, tamper-aware. If you look at one of the major hacks, I think it was Barnes & Noble, they had all these pin pads on their countertops that were taken off by some bad guys, cracked open, and then some stuff was put in there to grab these pins later, and then they came and recollected the pin pads, okay? So what happens now with this program with PCI is that that device has to be tamper resistant, first of all, very difficult to open. And then if it is open, it needs to be aware of that, even if it's unplugged from power. So we have to put a lifetime battery in every one of these devices, and there are sensors all throughout the device that if anyone exposes it, opens it, breaks it, crashes it, whatever they're trying to do to get into the device can be aware of that and can take an action, like erasing its keys and setting itself up so the next time you plug it in, maybe you didn't know it was hacked, bad guys did something to it, next time you run something through it, it communicates to us and says, hey Bluefin, I have been exposed, let the merchant know, let the provider know, and quarantine me. And so all of that needs to happen and be tested. So it's a very smart, self-aware device that can really protect itself even when you're not around. So it's a really holistic solution here. And then, of course, we talked about that online device management system. Next slide, please. Let's get to the good stuff. We're talking all the time about mitigating the risk of breaches, which is, want to keep the first thing first. But this is the really important one, and I think that really gets merchants excited. As you all know, there are 335 security requirements from PCI that you have to maintain 365 days a year. And if you drop the ball on one of those requirements, one of those afternoons, you get a breach. And that's what happens in the case of some of these large breaches. You'll see, I won't pick on any names, but they maybe even had been recently audited by an on-site PCI QSA auditor. And within 2 months, they had a major national breach. And that's because one afternoon, the bad guys got in and get all the data out, and it's game over. So it's kind of a losing game trying to keep that up, building these high walls and these firewalls and everything, trying to protect the data. As I call it, let's not protect the fort, let's devalue the data in the fort. And that's what we have here. Instead of trying to have 335 security requirements around protecting the data, let's use point-to-point encryption and tokenization to devalue the data, pulling any of the value out, so if the hackers do get it, they get nothing to use it. And that's why if you use this program, you can see going from about 335 requirements down to fewer than 30 requirements. So that's a 90-95% reduction in the PCI security requirements that you have to implement and maintain 365 days a year. So there's so many fewer controls and moving parts that it really simplifies your PCI program, gives you your network back, gives you your operations back, and you can focus on the business of doing your business rather than having to be constrained all the time by all these security requirements. Now I can tell you that the 30 remaining questions are fairly soft. They aren't things like you have to have a firewall and you have to have it configured correctly and you have to have that firewall log monitored and you have to have patches to that firewall done on a certain date by a certain time. All of that messes out. This has to do with things like, who is your P2P provider, Bluefin? Are you tracking your devices? Yes, Bluefin's got the P2P manager doing that for me. Do you have an awareness program telling your employees not to write down credit cards? Yes, you've got a policy somewhere that says don't write down credit cards. So it's really, I would consider the softer stuff, not the technical requirements. Huge difference, huge impact, and consequently a huge return on investment. If you take out that many requirements, think of all of the less work that's going to be happening. Not only the risk on the top side, but the ongoing cost and investment that your organizations make in investing into being and maintaining security. So huge difference. Don't want to understate this, but we'll move on so we can keep the flow going. Here's a case study. This is we do the entire University of California family there, but this particular group we asked them to do a case study for us so we could start to determine some ROI. 20 devices. Before this, they had reporting that they had to do for their annual stuff. They had firewalls. They had external penetration scans, external vulnerability scans quarterly. They had a lot of different costs that going into this. They calculated after their first year $60,000 in savings over their department for the impact of being able to remove a lot of those requirements in their environment. So that's after just 1 year of implementation. So this is definitely powerful stuff, even at the small level, even if it's only 20. Obviously, as those numbers get larger, the ROI becomes greater. Next slide. So what does PCI say? Again, I told you that PCI said malware is the answer to all of this. Excuse me, PDPE is the answer to all this malware. Don't take my word for it. Feel free to go to PCI's website and download their malware infographic. This is one of the pages. I think it's a two-sider. And you will see it will very accurately describe what malware is and how it does so much evil. And then it will talk about how having that device, as I talked about, with that tamper awareness, if you call this the SRED, secure reading and exchange of data, that's sort of the industry jargon, but it's what I explained earlier, that tamper-proof and tamper awareness, and a P2PE solution managing that, and that's the Bluefin solution. Those are the two ways to address that according to the infographic. Please take a look at that. Next slide, please. I don't want to just talk about P2PE all day. I will leave this sort of on a good note here. It is a holistic solution that we're offering here. EMV is, if you're experiencing a lot of loss to counterfeit cards, let's say you're doing gift cards at the border, that kind of stuff, and you're experiencing that, EMV, or if you have for whatever reason, EMV can be important to your process. However, that is authentication of the card. From a data security and protection, really the 1-2 punch is P2PE and tokenization. Some folks say, well, we use tokenization before we do this, or we use a hosted payment page. Well, tokenization and hosted payment pages are not going to provide the data security that you're looking for, because you've got to enter that data into a keyboard if you're keying it in, or swipe it into a swiper. And it's at that point, that first pass, while it's going through the keyboard, perhaps passing a keylogger or some malware in your workstation, that first pass is we call data in motion, where point-to-point encryption comes in and protects it while it's in motion. After it's been processed and you get it back into your systems, now tokenization comes into play. You store the token instead of the credit card. So that devalues the data at rest in your databases or file storage. So this is 1-2 punch, P2PE for data in motion and tokenization for data at rest. Next slide. Finally, the device here, let's get to the good stuff. Here's kind of what it looks like. As you can see, it's not little rubber keys. That would be unsuitable for back office or contact center sorts of situations. This is a nice keypad. Think of an accountant's 10-key keypad. Uses USB keyboard emulation, so there's no special software or tray applications that have to be installed. It just acts and interacts just like a keyboard would, only the data that comes out of it is not a 16-digit credit card number. It is ABC 1 through 3. It's we call the business ciphertext, but it is a visual representation of that encrypted credit card. All of this back office decryption is happening off-site in our solution center. And of course, it takes all of that clear text cardholder data out of your environment where it can be exposed to a breach. It's an uninterrupted user experience, and it's a single touch point for the contracting, sales, and support. And what I mean by that is that the device itself acts just like a keyboard would. It's not like they have to go to this other credit card machine that's going back and forth with a processor, then they have to go back and put information in. This thing goes, the data comes right out of the cursor. You put the cursor in the credit card field on the screen, and instead of keying it in on your keyboard, you key it in on the keypad. And in fact, the screen, if you try to key that credit card into your keyboard, the software, for example, Delego, will say, no, you need to go ahead and use that keypad. I can tell that you're using your real keyboard right now. So it protects that unintended accidental entry from a standard keyboard. Amazing device and amazingly inexpensive. So feel free to ask about that and the pricing and inquire. I would say these things are in many cases half or less than most of the credit card machines that you may look at in a retail scenario. It does accept Badge-Index Stripe, so it can have other purposes and use, but this device is mainly targeted for back office, card not present, contact centers, and call centers. And with this, we'll pass it over to Mike to tell us about the data flow and how the process works here.
Yeah, thanks, Rustin. That's awesome. So just a little bit too on that device. It's very simple in terms of its connectivity. It's just a USB device. It gets plugged in. It emulates a keyboard. The USB port provides power to it. There's no special drivers, so it's very straightforward to connect. We thought that we would go through today as well, sort of show you how things are handled on a more of a day-to-day basis. So, you know, we've got all the background and the benefits and so on of validated P2PE, but what does that actually look like? What's the process flow look like? And what does that look like within SAP, and how is that done? So we're going to do a little demo, but before we get to that demo, I just thought that I'd go through and explain from this diagram, and hopefully folks can see this well enough and it's not too small for you to be able to visualize. But on the left side of the diagram, we've got the SAP, CRM, and ECC. That connects down to Delego, which connects down to the payment processor. On the right side, we have at the top the call center. So we've got call center reps. They're taking Moto orders, mail order, telephone order, and their workstations are connected via USB to the shred key pin pad device. So when a customer calls in and is talking to the customer service rep, and they're giving their card now, the customer service rep will key that in through that pin pad. The credit card will be encrypted in hardware with the keys that have been injected at Bluefin's PCI certified key injection facility. So that's all pre-done. The device is prepared for use. And so that's fully encrypted. It's going to traverse the workstation, the network, communicate down through to us. We in turn communicate through to Bluefin. And at that point, there's a service that Bluefin offers that we've written to their API called DecryptX. So the encrypted credit card is decrypted at that service at Bluefin, and it's returned to Delego. We in turn then tokenize it. So to the far right, we have the token database. So we take the credit card that's returned from Bluefin, we re-encrypt it actually and store it in our database, and then we return that token back up to the order entry screen and populate the field where the credit card would normally be placed. So now we have a token to work with, and the processes function entirely normally from that point forward. On order save, we communicate down through to the processor, we get our authorization response codes, and we're good to go. So I think then with that, we will go to the demonstration, and if I can get control of the screen, we'll bring that up. So I'm looking for a requirement for showing my screen. So this should be showing up on screen for folks. What we have here on screen now is SAP VA01. So we've got an order that has been entered. So I've put that in already. And quantity 1, $75 order. If I go to the header, there's the payment cards tab. What Delego has done is we've added through transport an enter card button, and this is where the credit card is going to be entered. So if we typed in the credit card directly in here, we'd be bringing the application into scope from a PCI perspective. But what we're going to do is we're going to hit the enter card button, and we are now presented with a web page that is hosted at Delego, totally externally from the merchant. If we click swipe card, we then have the option to either swipe the card or key the card in. If it's an operator that's talking to someone on the phone, then the operator is going to be keying that in. If the card's there, then they could swipe the card. The device handles it both ways. I did a swipe. When I click submit on that swipe, what happens is now it's gone in background. We've received this unencrypted data back and tokenized it. If I click back over onto SAP, that token now gets populated into my SAP screen. So all of those pieces that we showed you on that solution map or process flow diagram have taken place very simply. All we had to do was key that in. All of the stuff's happening automatically in background. It's very intuitive, very simple flow. I click my checkbox, and now I have a token that's placed into my SAP system, and I can save this order. And if I do that, it's going to go out and do an authorization. And I'll just finish up here after I just bring this back up and show you that it's, the authorization's done. So we go back into the header and we look at our payment cards and we can see we've got a green light here. This card has gone out with this token and is authorized, and everything has taken place with the merchant's network workstations, SAP, all being maintained out of PCI scope. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rustin.
Thanks, Mike. I am going to just wait for the next slide to pop up here. So let's talk about the chain of custody, the unchained belly. This is something that is a new requirement that came out as part of the P2PE program with PCI, but also tracking devices is under DSS 3.2 and going forward being required for any merchant that accepts credit cards. So this is something that's important and becoming more important. There was some complexity here with regards to moving the devices from manufacturers to the injection once it gets to you at your locations, etc. How do you track this? And so we saw that early on and built a system to automate that. This is unique. Bluefin is the only company in the world that offers an end-to-end, if you will, point-to-point encryption management tool that simplifies and manages all of this for you. I know that some of you may not have the luxury of using some other competitive product, but I assure you, having done that, this would be a breath of fresh air knowing that there really is very little for you all to do to interact with this. And on top of that, it produces the reporting necessary at the end of the year for the tracking of devices that you would need to submit. Out of those remaining 29 questions, one of those is where your device is and what are their statuses. All you have to do is hit a print button now rather than trying to track down devices and use spreadsheets. So very amazing tool here to manage a very complex process behind the scenes. Next slide, please. We do have injection facilities around the country that can inject these devices, one in Boston and one in Atlanta, and we're adding 2 more, one in Atlanta and one in California. So we'll have 4 by, I'd say, the end of this year. So these are the devices where they go in, and just an interesting aside that really separates this. When these devices are at these injection facilities, one of the requirements from PCI is that no one can be in the room alone with the device for more than 30 seconds. So it's called dual control. So one person has to be injecting the key into the device, and the other person has to be sort of watching them or nearby, perhaps also injecting, but there has to be 2 people. That way no one's left alone with the device. And if they badge out or if they leave the room, the system has to automatically know this and set off an alarm after 30 seconds, and all the devices in the room have to be reset and rekeyed. So it's amazing, the level of protection that goes on behind the scenes to maintain the integrity and the purity of these devices by the time they reach you. Next slide, please. We won't go into too much demo or but I'll give you an overview. This is the system that I talked about, the P2PE device management. This is where your statuses and locations of all your devices are, and this is what you'll be interacting in. When you get the device in a tamper-evident baggie, you simply key in the serial number from the device, from the baggie. You open the baggie, which is a tamper-evident baggie. You key in the serial number from the device, and those 2 things match up in our system. We activate the device and we start using it. You can start using it. If the device is lost or stolen, you can go in here and say, yeah, I lost this device. We'll quarantine it. We'll let you know if any decryption requests come through. Obviously, if it's quarantined, we're not going to be doing anything with it. So you can manage, certain device changes or adds and generate your annual reporting from this product. Next slide. And then finally, I'll leave with this. The impact of PCI P2PE. One of the big questions we got early on for the first year also was, okay, so I'm going to invest into these devices, which are, again, inexpensive, and I'm going to invest into the solution, which is reasonably priced. What's my actual return on investment? It's hard for me to calculate as a merchant sometimes, right? Sometimes these PCI security programs in these companies have been built organically over the last decade when PCI DSS came out, maybe even before that under other security programs. So it's really hard to assess the true cost throughout the organization in terms of manpower and licensing and hardware and infrastructure and annual reporting and compliance departments and just everything and awareness, the whole deal. What is the true cost of this? And then how would P2PE PCI Validated help me in that? So what we have here is a white paper. I encourage you to take a look at it. It was done by an independent third party called Coalfire. And they built this very great tool, which has matrices and spreadsheets, etc., so that you can go through here in a sort of interview format within the document, enter in the information that you know from your own reality in your world, put those costs in, put in that stuff, and then calculate exactly what the ongoing cost is to the P2P, to the PCI program, and then what the impact of it is. And that's, of course, what the University of California did with their case study. Many other merchants are doing this either after a year so that they can assess that real hard difference, or sometimes they're doing it ahead in order to make a business justification for implementing this. Obviously, this has to do with the cost of compliance, which is important to a lot of folks. We all know that having a breach is extremely many times more costly than the savings in the cost of compliance. But I just want to point out that we're giving you two metrics today. According to the Ponemon Institute, which the whole risk industry in the payments industry follows each year for their annual cost of a breach per record, that's $165. So you can take that to understand your high-end risk, and then you can use this tool to understand the return on investment from putting and implementing P2PE against the cost of compliance. Also, there is a guest blog here for that you can read other downloads and white papers and opinion on this. As you can see, while it might be previously a fairly arcane topic, it is the #1 answer to the #1 problem affecting merchants, globally right now. So it's getting a lot of attention, and there might be misinformation out there. So I encourage you to read this if you'd like to learn some interesting ways of approaching it. And with that, I'll pass it back to our moderators.
Thank you so much, Rustin. Hi, everyone. This is Danielle. And so we're going to open it up right now to questions. So give me 1 second so I can go over to the question pane. And we do have a couple of questions here. So the first one, I think, Mike, this is probably for you. How long has Delego offered PCI-validated point-to-point encryption?
Yeah, Danielle, we did start exploring with Bluefin, with the P2PE solution back in around 2015, and there was certain demand that was there, and you folks had a product that was had evolved and was at that stage. So we were very pleased to be able to connect with you back then. We were able to write to your APIs. And so we've had a solution for, it's going on about a year, and frankly, we've got it installed in a number of locations, and it's been very solid. We've been very pleased with it. So it's an aspect of what we implement that really tends to go in, work well, but it's been about a year that we've been doing this. So, yep.
Okay. Excellent. I have a second question, and I think, again, Mike, this is probably for you. I think this is specific to the Delego system. Is this solution only for card entry in order entry, or can it also be used for AR?
Okay, right. So what I showed on screen in our demo earlier, that was card entry. So that was order entry, and Delego also has its Delego AR system that has visibility into SAP's FBL5 and open items, and we present those open items and allow the merchant to take credit card for payment against those open items. So we've integrated with the Shred Key, with the P2PE solution, the Bluefin solution, both into order entry as well as into AR. So the system works for both. So really, and actually there's one other area too where it works, and that's to deal with what's called the customer master. So if we're wanting to store credit cards against the customer master, to be keying that in through the shred key device, having the hardware encryption facilitate, devaluing that data across the network and workstation and so on, and then returning a token back to the SAP system. So really, we have it in three areas. We have it in order entry, we have it in AR, and we have it in for adding cards to the customer master.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. That's great information. And that, I think, is the end of our questions. I'm going to wait a couple of seconds and see if we get any more through. I'm just looking at our question pane. And we do not have any more through. So a couple of things to close out with. First of all, we want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. We have recorded this webinar, and it will be available in the next 1 to 2 days. Both on the Bluefin website and on the Delego website. Once that recording is available, we will email the attendees, and you can go ahead, and if you'd like to see it again or share it with any of your colleagues, you'll be able to do that. If you would like more information on the solution, best way to get in touch with us is either through Mike's email or sales@delegopayments.com. If you would like to talk to Mike specifically, it's mikeverwolf@delegopayments.com. And that email address is on the screen right now. So with that being said, Mike, Rustin, Christine, I want this webinar that you didn't get a chance to ask today, please feel free to follow up with us. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.